You know the feeling. The deadlines are piling up, you're exhausted, your eyes are barely staying open. Yet to everyone around you, you project a calm, unflinching grip on reality. Then, someone notices you're spread thin. They ask if they can take something off your plate. You smile and reflexively say, "No, I'm good, I've got it." If you felt a small, specific tightening in your chest just now, pay attention to it. That physical response happens when a question gets uncomfortably close to a truth you've been quietly managing for years. This chronic refusal to ask for help is a survival strategy. It's a way of moving through the world that worked once upon a time, but it's been running in the background for decades without updates. You find yourself running on fumes, staying up past midnight to solve a problem entirely alone. A 5-minute conversation with a colleague could have resolved it, but reaching out feels impossible. You rationalize the isolation. You tell yourself you will finally ask for backup when things get really bad, but you constantly shift your own threshold for suffering quietly. Really bad gets pushed further away week after week. Eventually, the people around you stop checking in. They aren't ignoring you. You have flawlessly trained them to believe that you always have everything under control. The more capable you become, the more invisible your struggle is to everyone else. The success of your protective facade is exactly what traps you. To understand why reaching out feels so dangerous, we have to look back. At some point in your early life, you asked someone for help, and you were met with frustration, dismissal, or unavailability. Psychologist John Bowlby mapped out how early relational experiences build what he called internal working models. These act as subconscious templates. Your nervous system is highly efficient at pattern recognition. When it logged that needing people led to disappointment, it adapted, writing a strict rule. You must rely entirely on yourself to stay safe. What started as a necessary childhood adaptation has hardened over time. It morphed from a temporary shield into a rigid identity that isolates you as an adult. This pattern distorts adult friendships and romantic relationships. The person who refuses help almost inevitably becomes the one who gives a lot. Giving creates a sense of safety. If you are the one helping, the power dynamic feels manageable. You are needed, and for some, being needed is the closest they have ever come to experiencing secure attachment. Receiving, on the other hand, requires exposure. Admitting you cannot handle a situation threatens to collapse the entire image you've built. The competent, self-sufficient persona would vanish. This dynamic creates an invisible ledger. Over time, the relationship becomes heavily lopsided. The giver starts to feel completely unseen, while the receiving partner carries a vague sense of guilt they can't quite articulate. Because asking for a course correction threatens the very identity that has kept you safe, you stay silent. You starve the relationship of mutual vulnerability until it collapses under the weight of quiet resentment. People trapped in this cycle operate under a heavy cognitive distortion. They carry a certainty that asking for support will make them an unacceptable burden to the people they care about. This minimalist bar chart maps the findings of a 2008 study by researchers Flynn and Lake. Comparing our perception of willingness to help against reality, humans consistently underestimate how eager others are to lend a hand by nearly 50%. Yet the nervous system remains locked in a protective stance, guarding against the perceived threat of being needy. The isolated mind prefers the safety of this illusion over the prospect of asking for help and watching its carefully constructed self-image fall apart. You might know exactly why you do this, yet feel completely stuck. Telling yourself it is irrational to do everything alone does not override your nervous system. Deep conditioning ignores logic. Your extreme self-reliance was protecting a much younger version of you. That child learned that reaching out was a risk that didn't pay off, so they built a wall to ensure they'd never have to feel that silence again. When you look at that wall, you begin to see what it's actually made of. It's built from the unacknowledged sadness of a child who needed a hand and learned to move forward without one. We call this grief. You can memorize all the statistics about people wanting to help, but until that loss is dealt physically, the nervous system will keep the defensive walls firmly in place to protect that younger self. Dismantling this habit requires you to rebuild with better materials. You start through tiny micro-exposures. You ask for a very small favor. Then you observe the shock of surviving it. You notice the person didn't pull away. You see that they weren't crushed by the weight of your request. You realize you are still whole, even after being seen as someone who needed something. The strength you developed by carrying everything alone is real, and it is worth honoring. It took immense resilience to build that load-bearing wall of competence and navigate life on your own. But that extreme self-reliance was always meant to be a temporary bridge to safety, not a permanent destination. You are not built to carry everything alone. True maturity requires holding the capacity to give alongside the courage to finally receive.